immigration, if done correctly, if done in an ethical manner, would be a win-win. Okay, you get migrant workers that come into the United States and immediately get a pay raise in comparison to the wages that they would have gotten in their home nations. That way, they can send money back home. Okay.
You little tater tot bitch. We are 2 minutes and 35 seconds into this video. I'm just gay as the rest of us, motherfucker.
Feels just the same. Another sunny day in LA. Everything is fine, so they say. Wonder what the news is.
He had a critique on the H1-B visa program. And I don't disagree with Bernie Sanders' critique, even though I haven't read the entirety of what he was saying. So maybe there's some stuff in there that's actually crazy and like nativist or whatever. But the H1-B visa program absolutely is utilized in a way to create further expendable and more exploitable labor. I don't know why people consider that to be racist and unacceptable to openly say. I have been saying it nonstop. I haven't stopped saying that as well. So I don't know why people would get mad at Bernie Sanders also saying it, because that is the object of, that is the purpose of this program. Of course, once again, anything that the government does is going to be packaged in a way that makes sense. So the H-1B visa program is going to be packaged as though this is a way to offer citizenship to the best and brightest all around the globe. And there is certainly some truth to that as well, right? That is true. But that's just spin at the end of the day. The reality of the matter is we destroy the global south, and then we take advantage of all of the highest achievers globally by creating an immigration structure where we take educated workers in an effort to displace the American workforce, because those guys will, due to the currency exchange rate, especially if they're sending money back home, which there's nothing wrong with, by the way. It's fantastic. That's why economists that are not ideologically on board with the way I see the world will say this is a win-win. Okay, even though I also consider it to be a win-win. Due to the currency exchange rate, they are oftentimes interested or willing to take on jobs at a pay cut. But more importantly than that, if an H-1B visa worker loses their job, they get deported. So if an H-1B visa worker loses their job and they get deported, they are even more exploitable. So the solution to make this process more ethical and not a mechanism to displace and depress American wages is to ensure that there are safeguards that maintain wage parity and a parity for benefits offered and a protection, additional protections offered to all workers, including H-1B visa workers, protection from deportation, for example. Now, if you were to do that, then that makes sense. Then bosses can't use the H-1B visa program to create extra exploited to create a hyper exploitable secondary labor market. Okay? That's it. That's the real solution. But of course, that solution is not necessarily one that benefits the capital owners. So, Bernie Sanders is in a lot of hot water. Let's take a look at what he said. News: we need major reforms in the H-1B program. Okay, is it in here? No, these are older videos from back in the day when Bernie Sanders said open borders is a Koch brothers policy. And the last time he talked about H1-B workers and the visa structure. And he has complained about it quite a bit. This is not new for Bernie Sanders. So let's read what he had to say. He wrote this yesterday. The current chairman of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions today releases the following statement on H1-B guest worker visas and the recent debate concerning the program. Bernie said, there has been a lot of discussion lately about the H-1B guest worker program. Elon Musk and a number of other billionaire tech company owners have argued that this federal program is vital to our economy because of the scarcity of the highly skilled American engineers and other tech workers. I disagree. The main function of the H-1B visa program and other guest worker initiatives is not to hire the best and the brightest, but rather to replace good-paying American jobs with low-wage indentured servants from abroad. The cheaper the labor they hire, the more money the billionaires make. Where's the issue with this statement? This is 100% correct. The notion that there aren't skilled American tech workers out there that could be doing these jobs is completely, the notion that there are none in the current labor pool is not only silly, it's an abject lie. It's a lie that is channeled through mainstream resources as well, especially when you consider the hundreds of thousands of layoffs that have taken place in our Silicon Valley quantitative easing induced bubble that finally burst a little bit. Okay? In 2022 and 2023, the top 30 corporations using this program laid off at least 85,000 American workers while they hired over 34,000 new H-1B guest workers. There are estimates that as many as 33% of all new information technology jobs in America are being filled by guest workers. Further, according to the Census Bureau data, there are millions of Americans with advanced degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math who are not currently employed in those professions. If there is really a shortage of skilled tech workers in America, why did Tesla lay off over 7,500 American workers this year, including many software developers and engineers at its factory in Austin, Texas, while being approved to employ thousands of H-1B guest workers? Moreover, if these jobs are only going to the best and brightest, why has Tesla employed H-1B guest workers as associate accountants for as little as $58,000, associate mechanical engineers for as little as $70,000 a year, and associate material planners for as little as $80,000 a year? Those don't sound like highly specialized jobs that are for the top 0.1%, Musk claimed this week. If this program is really supposed to be about importing workers with highly advanced degrees in science and technology, why are H-1B guest workers being employed as dog trainers, massage therapists, cooks, and English teachers? Can we really not find English teachers in America? Let's be clear. To the extent that there may be labor shortages in our country in some highly specialized areas that need to be filled by employees from above through the H-1B program, we must utilize this program as a very short-term and temporary approach. In the long term, if the United States is going to be able to compete in a global economy, we must make sure that we have the best educated workforce in the world. And one way to help make that happen is to substantially increase the guest worker fees large corporations pay to fund scholarships, apprenticeships, and job training opportunities for American workers. This is something that I have advocated for from my first days as a U.S. Senator. Further, We also must significantly raise the minimum wage for guest workers, allow them to easily switch jobs, and make sure that corporations are required to aggressively recruit American workers first before they can hire workers from overseas. The widespread corporate abuse of the H1-B program must be ended. Bottom line, it should never be cheaper for a corporation to hire a guest worker from overseas than an American worker. Mr. Musk, Mr. Ramaswamy, and others have argued that we need a highly skilled and well-educated workforce. They are right, but the answer, however, is not to bring in cheap labor from abroad. The answer is to hire qualified American workers first and to make certain that we have an education system that produces the kind of workforce that our country needs for the jobs of the future. And that's not just engineering. We are in desperate need of more doctors, nurses, dentists, teachers, electricians, plumbers, and a host of other professions. 30 years ago, the economic elite and political establishment in both major parties told us not to worry about the loss of blue-collar manufacturing jobs that would come as a result of disastrous, unfettered trade agreements like NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China. They promised that those lost jobs would be more than offset by the many good-paying white-collar information technology jobs that would be created in the United States. Well, that turned out to be a big lie. Not only have corporations exported millions of blue-collar manufacturing jobs to China, Mexico, and other low-wage countries, they are now importing hundreds of thousands of low-paid guest workers from abroad to fill the white-collar technology jobs that are available. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, when the richest 3 people in America now own more wealth than the bottom half of our country, and when the CEOs of major corporations make almost 300 times more than their average workers, we need fundamental changes in our economic policies. We need an economy that works for all, not just the few. And one important way forward in that direction is to bring about major reforms in the H1-B program. Now, of course, what's interesting about this process is that because the H1-B worker structure benefits capital owners, both the Democratic Party and the Republicans will end up defending it. They will defend it because, not because they are, nice, or because they want immigration into the country, or because they love, the idea that America is a land of prosperity for the migrants that are coming in here, well-educated migrants that are coming in here to work these jobs. They only care because, once again, there is additional exploitation, which means that profits will go up because it means that you can depress wages further. Okay? So that is the real reason. And the real reason why people can be endlessly racist to the undocumented migrants on both sides of the aisle as well is because there is always an endless well of undocumented migrants that are crossing the border to come and work at these very low-wage jobs. Now we're not talking about the H-1B visa program. Now we're talking about migration patterns. Okay? And the more people take a reactionary stance towards migration from either party, the easier it is to dominate them. And the more you dominate them, the more you dehumanize them, the easier it is to exploit them. There will never come a time where, no matter how cruel the border policies are, where people from Guatemala, people from Mexico, people from El Salvador, and many other places are not going to seek refuge in the United States of America. They will always come to the United States of America because of what we have done to their countries. We've destabilized them. Okay? Classy if you're rich, H1B, trashy if you're poor, undocumented. Most of this argument from the right unironically stem from white nativist anti-immigrant stances. They think Indians and the Chinese are lesser than they are. Okay? They get mad that Indian workers and Chinese workers are replacing them. But they would get mad if it was Polish workers as well. Trust me. Because there is a real, beyond the white supremacy, there's a real anger and resentment that people feel that they misdirect towards their fellow workers. There is no difference between an Indian worker or an Italian worker or a Polish worker and an American worker. There is no difference there at all. They have the same exact class interests. Okay? They do. it is always the systems that are designed in a way to pit you against the Indian or Chinese H-1B visa workers. Just so you understand. Megaphonic says, my read of this is that two things can be true. Bernie's right in pointing out the inherent exploitations of the existing H-1B system and providing common sense reforms to fix them, while also being wrong to make a nativist adjacent argument about it. Americans should get jobs first instead of just welcoming immigrants as Americans. It feels incongruous for him to support easing immigration restrictions while making this argument. Yeah, the only part of this that that comes across as like a little, I mean, if you're hypersensitive and don't believe that Bernie Sanders cares about like migrants or whatever, then you can read this part as like, oh, well, or where is it? Where is it? If you're hypersensitive about it, I think like there's a couple parts where he just like basically talks about like these have to be American workers first. How is Americans should get the jobs first a little nativist, bro? But I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all. Because if you understand the H-1B visa guest worker program to be created specifically to displace the American labor pool with an easier to exploit labor force that you ship from overseas, then yeah, of course you're going to say, no, you got to make sure that you hire Americans first in the United States of America. Because if you don't do that, then you arrive at another point that Bernie Sanders makes very clearly here. You arrive at NAFTA. You arrive at permanent normal trade relations with China. He's absolutely right about that. We talk about how American manufacturing was gutted and destroyed. We talk about the ghost cities in middle America, where places that relied on one corporation basically dominating the town and being its lifeline, only to leave that town and leave it desolate as a consequence. And they leave that town because they ship the manufacturing jobs overseas. And at the time, the way that this was packaged by liberals and Republicans, who are also liberal alike, was to, one, on the Republican side, this is great for our profits. This is great for our profits. This is going to do free trade. This is incredible. This is an incredible opportunity. And for the liberals, the argument was, well, we're helping these countries. Now, of course, in most circumstances, American dominance continues, and therefore, those countries are not able to take in the foreign capital and use it to their advantage. China is the one exception to the rule, and we have never forgiven them for it. If China also operated in the exact same ways as Mexico, because Mexico is so close to the United States of America, so deeply entrenched in American politics and American intervention, Mexico was not able to, due to corruption and the implementation of a narco state, was not able to distribute its funds, its foreign capital, in the same way to engage in even development and urbanization in the way that China did. China, due to being seen as a counter to the potential Soviet regime with the Sino-Soviet split and a multitude of different factors, was able to take in that foreign capital and evenly distribute it amongst this population through central planning. And like I said, if your attitude was that China will never be able to reach the, reach a competitive level and become a hegemon, that will outcompete the United States of America in key sectors in a matter of 3 to 4 decades, then yeah, you're thinking, yeah, we can consistently keep dominating them and use China and the Chinese population as slave labor overseas. The problem, however, is that due to central planning, due to a genuine interest in building the Chinese nation state, China was able to take that foreign capital and distribute it in a way that genuinely improved the lives of 1 billion Chinese people, taking 800 million Chinese people out of the throes of abject, extreme global poverty in a matter of decades. This is unconscionable, and it is completely unacceptable. And that is the reason why we are already in the throes of a second Cold War, this time against the red threat of China. The liberal take on what he said is, in fact, the racist take. So, my attitude on this has always been that there is enough wealth to go around, whether it be through the H1-B visa program, whether it be the processing and documenting of the 10 million plus undocumented migrants that work in the agricultural sector, in the construction field, and create wage parity for them so that they are not used as an endlessly replaceable, hyper-exploited second labor pool, a permanent underclass that is used against the documented U.S. labor force. That is the real solution. That is the real way to get out of this problem. But of course, that would require shrinking profit margins, and that would be unacceptable. What did you say? If you really think anything Bernie said is racist, I genuinely don't think your opinions will win any elections anytime soon. I mean, that's also a tricky conversation, because if Bernie had said something genuinely racist, there are plenty of genuinely racist people. There are plenty of, like, anti-Indian sentiment, for example, goes a long way on both Twitter and in general. We must not find ourselves in the throes of right-wing reactionary politics simply because it will be beneficial. That's the attitude that the Democrats have. That's the attitude of the Democratic Party in general. As an H-1B visa holder, I ain't rich, and I'm easily susceptible to being fired if I join a union and subsequently get deported if I don't find a job in 2 months' time. Also, the path to citizenship or green card takes so long. Have already spent 10 years in the U.S., 15 plus years to get my green card. Brian, kill me. So yes, we are stuck in limbo half our lives. Exactly. This is the reality of the H-1B visa guest worker program. This is what it is. This is the reason why H-1B visa workers are seen as you know, really valuable alternative. Once again, do you think Bernie is nativist under the cover? No, I don't. I don't think Bernie is a nativist under the cover. Like, I don't think he's like secretly a racist guy who's like, I do not care about the Indian workers. I am, obviously, as you guys know, pro-immigration, pro-immigrant, and also pro-workers' rights. The problem is, most people cannot see beyond the neat little confines of American capitalism. So if you cannot envision a world where capital dominates, you cannot understand my advocacy. And if you cannot see past the point of capitalism, if you treat capitalism as though it is the norm, as though there is no other alternative, or the alternatives are far worse and far more deadly, far more devastating, then yes, of course, you are going to constantly look for bandage solutions. And those bandage solutions are going to always be right-wing reactionary. If you cannot envision a world where the American criminal justice system is dramatically changed, right? Where we focus on rehabilitation rather than incarceration, where we try to solve the underlying material inequalities where crime manifests, then yeah, you're going to be like, crime is out of control. We have to do something about it. You're going to have the shaky Gurga, Uncle Jenk attitude on crime. You're going to say, there's crime everywhere. We got to deal with it. We got to deal with it. How do we deal with it? Well, through more apprehension, more detention, more draconian measures, please. I look to the past 200 plus years of American history and American attitudes towards crime and punishment, and I see an abject failure of that kind of attitude. America has some of the worst crime and punishment systems on the planet. One of the worst, one of the most inhumane structures for criminal punishment. Sure, we like to think highly of ourselves and say, well, at least we're not caning people like they do in Singapore or Malaysia, right? We don't have corporal punishment, but we still torture the overwhelming majority of criminals under the overwhelming majority of convicts, overwhelming majority of criminals under our criminal justice system. We punish them excessively. Okay? We don't hang people. We don't shoot them. We're not barbaric. We don't decapitate them. We don't behead them. That is barbaric. We simply find other alternative methods of execution. Well, it's still capital punishment at the end of the day, a practice that has been banned in many other comparable OECD nations. Somebody in the chat claims that Bernie is a nationalist. That's funny. Yeah, they're gonna be shameless about it and say Bernie is a nationalist socialist. Bernie's a Strasserite. Bernie. Feel the burn. Not to mention that the U.S. is responsible for a lot of the third world violence, both directly and indirectly. Absolutely. I think the irony also revolves around, and we're going to go back to, a different time where, well, lo and behold, Bernie Sanders still is warning about H1-B foreign workers replacing American labor. Let's take a look.
Corporations whose main argument is, we just can't find Americans to do this work, and we just need to go all over the world to bring people in. If you listen to them, they will tell you two things. First, in terms of low-skilled jobs, they say they need foreign workers to do the jobs that Americans just won't do. And then, Madam President, this is what really gets me. They tell us that they need more H1-B visas because Americans are just not smart.
I do see a lot of myself in Bernie, I'm not going to lie, where people constantly misunderstand his position, yell at him endlessly, and act like he's brand new, act like he's behaving brand new, and then you go back in time. No matter how far back you go in time, he literally is saying the same exact things. Okay? It's just like they'll be like, oh, Bernie, why are you acting so brand new about this? Oh, my God. And it's ironic. Like, I can't, in good conscience, understand how so many liberals are chirping at Bernie Sanders over the H-1B visa take, okay, claiming that this is racism, claiming that this is white nationalism, when those very same liberals, not that long ago, before the election, were hyping up Donald Trump's border bill that Joe Brandon was pushing. So which is it? It makes no sense. On the one hand, these guys are like, we got to do border control. We got to kill these migrants. We got to kill all of them. We got to kill every Mexican in the country. What are you doing? I'm a Democrat, by the way. But then simultaneously, they're like, wait, what? You mean that in a sector where there is unimaginable layoffs, these guys still have room for H-1B visa workers? Because it kind of feels like it's used as a mechanism to displace the existing American labor force and bring in, without any sort of wage parity initiatives, create a structure where you are basically taking advantage of a labor force, an educated labor force that's coming from overseas, from countries that we have dominated for years and kept poor for the most part. And it's odd. it's odd to take this approach where you're like, we have to start killing Guatemalan immigrants at the border, and then simultaneously say, Bernie's the real racist. Here's an example of this. Here's a prominent example of this from prominent liberal, not even prominent, but just like a liberal that loves complaining. Kentuckian Melanconiste says liberals calling Bernie anti-immigrant for correctly pointing out that corporations love H1Bs because it lets them exploit immigrant workers is real rich considering how ready and willing, yada, yada, yada. Armand Domaluski responds and says, we're calling Bernie out because he, A, explicitly lies about the program, saying it covers cashiers and dog walkers, and B, he parrots reactionary arguments about immigrants cutting American wages, which is a flat-out lie. Not that long ago, only a couple months prior, he says Kamala Harris ended the Trump border crisis. The audacity, barbarism critic says, the audacity of these fucking libs have to pretend they weren't repeating right-wing border crisis bullshit and promoting Donald Trump's immigration bill not 2 months ago. I wonder what's worse for immigrants, reforming the H-1B program or shutting down the border. They truly expect none of us to have a longer memory than Dianne Feinstein. Why do companies want H-1B workers when they could probably outsource for cheaper? They are already doing that. In the field of IT, especially with IT, especially with outsourcing becoming more easily accessible, people oftentimes do outsource. But that's the H-1B. The H-1B visa program is outsourcing in and of itself. That's what it is. H-1B visa is outsourcing for jobs that require you to be here. What is this? Bhaskar also disagrees with Bernie. I think Bernie's complaints are wrong on a few levels, and we need to make the case for benefits of immigration. But Bernie has had these views on H-1 programs forever, and support for varying degrees of restrictionism were a part of social democratic labor-backed movement for decades. Matt Brunig responds to Noah Smith. It's just absolutely pathetic watching leftists trying to hop on every right populist bandwagon 3 weeks late. Oh, hey, guys, we hate Indians taking your jobs too. Aren't we cool and populist? Most pathetic political movement. I think this is a false interpretation, understandably, from Noah Smith, who is paid to be wrong. I don't think that leftists are saying that. Wait, what? Not correct? H-1B employees are usually regular on-site employees? No, I said companies already outsource certain aspects of IT overseas when they can, but H-1B visa... The H-1B visa structure is for workers. They have to be on site. That's what I said. It's basically importing the outsourced labor into America because some labor you can't outsource. Can you explain how H-1B immigrants earning a wage of $120K are indentured slaves? How is calling these people dog trainers not a Nazi dog whistle? Oh, easy answer. White workers of the world unite. This is yours and Bernie's take, by the way. Yes, you guys are nativists. Yeah, I'm obviously a white nationalist, white nativist guy, and certainly not someone who's been living on U.S. soil since the year 2009, who has advocated for immigrants in more comprehensive ways than you ever will for the rest of your life. As you know, I am an anchor baby myself. But thank you. Thank you. All right. So at least the Nazi was right and honest when they said the H-1Bs because they hate immigrants. So here's the thing. Can you explain how immigrants earning a wage of $120K are indentured slaves? Great question. Let me tell you, if the actual job for that process, which is already lower than what it's supposed to be, because it's, that's how you generate profits under capitalism. if the actual job previously, the wages for that same job previously was $200,000, and now you are able to make someone do more work for only $120,000, then yes, you have successfully lowered the price, lowered the wages for that same exact job, and you're even getting more output from that same worker. Why are you getting more output from that same worker? Because that worker has an additional vector of exploitation. If they lose their job, they have 2 months to gain, 2 months to find gainful employment, or else they get deported. Okay? This is something that I've talked about quite a bit. This is just, incredibly coercive. So that is how it works. Because if you lose your job as one of the many H1-B visa workers that are currently working on U.S. soil, like many of my chatters, including the one that just talked about their experience, correctly told you, it takes 10 to 15 years minimum to even get a green card through the H1-B process. That's number one. Number two, when you don't have a green card, when you don't have permanent residency, when you don't have a pathway to citizenship, you are easier to exploit. That's how it is. I agree with you and Bernie a lot, but was it really hard for him to put a footnote in his take like P.S. racism against brown people bad instead he compared them to dog trainers? No, the reason why he brings up dog trainers in his argument is because the H-1B visa program is not for the tippy top of labor, and there's no other way to get these guys to work in highly specialized fields. And instead, H-1B visa workers are used in entry-level positions to outsource American laborers. That's it. And that's correct. Okay? That's not correct, though. There are no H-1B visas for dog trainers. Dude, I like that Bernie Sanders gives a comprehensive breakdown of how exploitative the H-1B visa program is, and liberals laser in on something that they can potentially use to undermine the broader analysis by saying that this guy who has dedicated his life to, social justice, civil liberties, and the like is actually secretly racist. This 900-year-old Jewish man is actually secretly a racist guy in hiding. And it came out now. He's actually racist, and he's using left populism to finally to finally get his true white nativist agenda across. Yeah. I don't think Elon Musk should be allowed to hire H-1B analysts, accountants, or engineers from overseas at Tesla who are paid as little as $52,000 and can have their visa taken away from them by their boss if they complain about unfair or illegal working conditions. That is the point. That is how it works. Eric Levitt says, I don't think that getting paid a six-figure salary to work for a company that you can leave for a different company, so long as the latter also agrees to sponsor a visa, is much like being an indentured servant. But it absolutely is. You can point to how much the median yearly income of people approved to work on U.S. and an H-1B visa is all day, every day. Okay? You can do that all day, every day. But if the actual payment, if the actual median yearly income for the people that are being displaced was significantly higher than that, and also on top of that, these guys literally have to rely on this job to stay in the United States of America, then it doesn't matter. It is exploitative, and that's the reason why people are doing it. Because the inverse of this is so funny to me. Do we think that Elon Musk and all of these mega corporations are actually like, in the ways that these Nazis see the world, trying to make America more brown or something, like actively? Is that what we think is going on? For good reasons, by the way, like because diversity is a good thing, right? I believe that. I'm a product of that. Okay. Is that what it is? Do we really think Tesla's like, no, we just really love diversity, and that's why we're doing this? Who are these baby brain chatters? Liberals were already pro-deporting us and wanting to destabilize Mexico with their New York Times hit pieces on judge elections in Mexico, and now with the New York Times story about how homemade fentanyl on top is a gas range stove is crazy. Fentanyl requires a functioning lab with ventilation systems. Yeah. That's what's really funny. That chatter's an idiot. I'm a software engineer and data scientist. Visa workers are paid on average 30 to 40% less, and the cost of importing the visa workers are on the government as tax credits, and they're used to threaten local engineers from asking for raises. Is very exploitative. Neoliberalism started this insane practice before it was just immigration. This is not nativist nationalist take. Test the nativist argument. Put all Scandinavians in the H1-B, but no farm hospitality worker place. How would those who think for a second H1B is about anything but tech bro economics might think differently? This is exactly the same as pocket watching your house or car. What's the point at which it is unacceptable depression of wages? Yeah, I mean, it's just a way for liberals to maintain the current status. And some are duped into thinking that this is a way to do anti-racism. And there is a lot of racism involved in this conversation, which is something that I frequently cover as well. And it's always funny because some people will come in here and be like, why aren't you talking about the racism angle when I do? Or when they come in and say, why are you talking so much about the racism angle? This is about displacing American laborers, which I also talk about. It's both. It's both. Anyone who says American jobs for Americans is racist are proving that they think Americans are white only. Yeah, that's also another part of this conversation as well. So, what's really interesting about this story, in my opinion, is that there is evidence across the board that even suggests that H-1B visa worker programs are not used as a mechanism to suppress American wages. Now, the irony there is that it's not because the the documented migration coming into the country is actually getting paid fairly. The argument is that American workers themselves also have so many vectors of pressure that also make themselves endlessly exploitable. That is the real reason. Okay? And even then, it still obviously is cheaper across the board. But beyond the wages, the real vector of exploitation for H-1B visa workers comes from the fact that you can make them do two people's jobs. You can lay off half of your workforce and replace it with a much smaller number of H-1B workers. Is it because they are simply harder workers? No one across the board is a harder worker than the other worker. It's just that they have more incentive to want to stay in the country, so they are easier to exploit. So sometimes it doesn't even bear itself out in wages. The difference in wages, I mean. So say clearly to your chat that there's no depression of wages tethered to immigration, because that's what they're claiming, and it's nativist. No, there is a depression of wages tethered to immigration. What are you talking about? How many times have I talked about undocumented migrants in this broadcast? Even outside of the H-1B program, what do you think an endless sea of undocumented migration does to American wages? It is specifically the point. The reason why these are not documented laborers, and even if they were documented laborers like the H-1B visa program, that would still end up creating some level of wage depression. It's just that even that's not enough for the American capital holders. They want it to be even more, which is why they have to stay undocumented. Therefore, if they ever complain, they can be deported. They have no legal recourse. They have no protection. That's the whole point. That is deliberate. That is the deliberate design of American migration. That is the reason why it is structured in the way that it is. And the same principle goes for legal immigration as well. Fewer immigrants mean more jobs. Wait, what? Not so, economists say. What is this? When the federal government banned the use of farm workers in Mexico, California's tomato growers did not enlist Americans to harvest the fragile crop. They replaced the lost workers with tomato picking machines. The Trump administration on Wednesday embraced a proposal to sharply reduce legal immigration, which has said that it would preserve jobs and lead to higher wages. Wait, I think one thing that you're misunderstanding is, number one, I am not in agreement with Donald Trump. I am not anti-immigration. I'm pro-immigration. I'm pro-processing migrants. Okay? You are? GG. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. The solution to the constant flow of migration depressing wages is not to stop it dead in its tracks. It's never going to happen regardless. And capital owners know that already. And that's why they rely on the endless white nativist sentiment. Okay? The solution is to document them, process them, and allow them to engage in the process of sectoral bargaining through unions, and therefore everyone's wages go up. There's enough wealth and enough money in this country that you can seize from the hands of capital owners. That is the entire point of this. It's so funny because this is probably something that I've argued for 1,000,000 times over. And it seems like a lot of people have just sat in this chat and not listened to what I was saying when I was talking about this exact same structure. But economists say the tomato story and a host of related evidence show that there is no clear connection between less immigration and more jobs for Americans. Rather, the prevailing view among economists is that immigration increases economic growth, improving the lives of the immigrants and the lives of the people who are already here. This is the one area where I do agree with the economists. Okay? Immigration is a win-win. Except immigration, if done correctly, if done in an ethical manner, would be a win-win. Okay? You get migrant workers that come into the United States and immediately get a pay raise in comparison to the wages that they would have gotten in their home nations. That way they can send money back home. Okay. That's number one. And number two, it improves the material conditions in their host nations, and it improves the conditions in the United States of America if there is a necessity for, I mean, we don't have a finite labor pool, right? We don't have a lump of labor. That is a fallacy. But the way that the immigration structure is designed, where you do actually have a second-class migration and a permanent underclass in the form of undocumented laborers, you do create a lump of labor. Or rather, you do create a structure where you can basically depress the wages across the board because they can always be replaced. American laborers can always be replaced with undocumented laborers. Honestly, one of your most salient points you ever made, at least for me, is when you said you deal with undocumented immigration by improving the living standards of said country, or make immigration so brutal that it's pretty much a death sentence or a slavery sentence if we did not reform immigration. Yes, there's only two ways out of this. It's not even like a correlation does not mean causation type situation. Like, you can see it. You make the economy scream in Venezuela in the way that the Trump administration did through a rigid sanctions regime, and then lo and behold, what do you get? More Venezuelan migrants coming into the United States of America seeking asylum, understandably so. That's it. There is a direct line right there, and it happened not that long ago. We saw it. We experienced it. Chowder's making a basic mistake in formal logic. Exploited immigrants do cause suppressed wages, but reporting them does not necessarily raise wages. It's not nativist or contradictory to recognize that. Yes. The only issue here is that the thing I advocate for ends up being infinitely better for every single American worker and all the migrant workers as well. It improves their living conditions, but it harms capital owners. It harms their profit margins. That's it. And that's the reason why it is completely unacceptable. So you can have a conversation about the racism of this subject all day, every day. You can talk about how racist it is. And there is certainly a lot of racism at play here. If you are selling this concept to a reactionary audience, you talk about how Indians are bad and they're not America. You can't create a nation with the children of immigrants, right? Like you can't maintain your country with the children of migrants or whatever people say, which is incredibly racist, right? American dominance also comes from American diversity. There is not a single person in this country, with the exception of Native Americans, that cannot trace their lineage directly back to someone that did not belong on this continent initially. It's so stupid to say this. It's so unimaginably hypocritical to say this, right? Having said that, however, the way, this is why I always recommend Aviva Chomsky's book, specifically talking about the way that like people became undocumented, okay? She's written extensively on this. They Take Our Jobs in 2007. And 20 other myths about immigration. But the one I'm talking about is one of her latest books, which is Undocumented, How Immigration... Where is it? Hold on. Undocumented, How Immigration Became Illegal. She wrote this book in 2014. It's a great book. It basically talks about the concept of an undocumented migrant, and why it exists and what it is utilized for at the behest of capital owners. Okay? That's why when people say no human being is undocumented, what are you talking about? Yeah, it sounds like squishy lib shit, but it also is true. What do you mean undocumented? What's the difference? What is the difference between someone who is an undocumented laborer and a documented laborer? There's no difference in terms of their class interests. It's not like undocumented workers are monolithic. It's not like undocumented immigrants are monolithic. They're coming from all around the planet, from so many different places, different walks of life, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different creeds. You think they all are monolithic in their understanding where they're coming in? No, the only difference between an undocumented worker and a documented one is paperwork. That's it. They want the exact same thing that you want. Shelter, food, fill their bellies, a better future for their children, a better life. That's it. There is no invasion occurring. You know what I mean? That's just racist nonsense. And just like I've said time and time again, there's only two ways out of this. You either make the process of migration so costly, so taxing, and so incredibly cruel, okay, that you put undocumented laborers in concentration camps and you discard them as though they are not human. And that can be done through decades of dehumanization, which we are doing already. We're leaning in that. There's only two ways out of it: apprehension and detention and further exploitation, or a more ethical approach to migration and a more ethical approach to American foreign policy in general that keeps these host nations in dire circumstances, destabilized. Bernie is in practical terms advocating for a labor aristocracy with this recruit Americans first policy. That's the leftist critique. What? There is no depression of wages by exploiting immigrants specifically. It's a labor pool-wide phenomenon. Reserve army of labor, brother. Bernie is in practical terms advocating for a labor aristocracy with his recruit American. I love the notion that there is someone who is knowledgeable enough on Marxian thought that still thinks that one of the, like, that is still working at the behest of the ultimate neoliberal strategy. Bernie is in practical terms advocating for a labor aristocracy whose recruit American workers first policy is just genuinely incorrect. Just like you can't have nationalized healthcare without free college, okay? Because obviously no one who is saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt is going to be able to go and then work with lower wages to become a, to work in like rural areas as a doctor. Okay. All of these things are interconnected. The notion that you can solve the global labor issues, like the issues that especially the global South experiences, laborers in the global South experience, you cannot solve without also changing American foreign policy. Not a neoliberal strategy. The simple solution is give all workers protections, not American workers first recruitment. Wait, what? No, that's my argument. And Bernie also mentioned that too. I love the labor aristocracy argument, especially when talking about stuff like this, because it goes back to that funny take where it's like, I don't care about the American elite. I want permanent first world genocide on the American working class. I don't care about the American capital owners. I don't care about the American politicians. I want the American workers to suffer. I want the American workers to suffer more. Yes, I am an advocate for what you are saying. And so is Bernie. He also mentioned protections for the H1-B visa workers in an effort to make sure that it's only utilized in the way that people claim it's being utilized. Because the reality of the matter is, if there's wage parity and additional protections for H1B visa workers, one, it automatically is good for all of the H1B visa workers that are currently living on U.S. soil. They want that, obviously. And two, then you cut out the corporate incentive that is like they can work H1B visa workers to the fucking bone. Okay? If they are no longer at the mercy of their corporate sponsors, okay, and fear deportation, if they don't work the weekends, if they don't work ridiculous hours, for example, then all of a sudden it's up to the corporation to hire exclusively highly skilled talent, which is what is supposed to be the major aspect of H-1B visa, the work structure to begin with. 2007, Bernie passes an amendment to increase H-1B employer fees to fund STEM scholarships for U.S. students. 2009, Bernie's amendment banning big banks from replacing U.S. workers with H-1B workers become law. This is kind of funny. You could literally point to this and say, well, here Bernie is defending all of those bankers that have exploited the American working class. Bernie is pro-financialization of America. Bernie is pro-financialization of the globe. Here he is defending the workers at banks. 2016, Bernie slams Disney for replacing U.S. workers with H-1B workers in Anaheim. The H-1B combo. Libs got mad that Nazis are dumb enough to think Bernie was on their side on this. It's two types of idiot with no material analysis. Yeah, that's why I say everyone's a liberal at the end of the day. Would you support a union for tech workers? Wouldn't that be similar to business unionism? Wait, what? Why would that be similar to business unionism? There's a difference between a capital strike and a work stoppage implemented by a labor union. You understand that, right? tech workers are still workers. Their job does not require further exploitation. They're not like managers, okay? The extension of this is to say that like a CEO is also a wage laborer at the end of the day. Yeah, their job is to depress wages. That is the number one thing that they do. Tech workers, on the other hand, do not engage in the wage depression structure. They are workers. Yeah, business unionism is just a monopoly, a cartel, which also exists. Check your privilege on the least woke way possible. People from the third world do backbreaking work to get a slave wage in the USA. Socialism also applies across borders, mate. Wait, what? Keep the wealthy USA wealthy take. In a global society, there should also be a global distribution of wealth. Keep the what? I'm confused about what is happening here because like I feel like we're back in the 90s and you got liberals like advocating for NAFTA, saying that this will be beneficial for the global south when it demonstrably has not been beneficial for the global south at all. And the only country where it was a benefit was one that had a centralized planning structure and was able to evade American scrutiny, partially because of, in my opinion, Orientalist thought, white supremacist opinions that like the Chinese are not smart enough to ever be competitive against the white Western liberal democracies. That's it. There's only one example on the planet that I can think of immediately. Okay, I'm sure there might be more, but there's one that I can think of, and that's China. That's the only country that has been able to utilize foreign capital that came by becoming a manufacturing hub for the globe, that was able to improve the material conditions of its working class. And we have never. Nah, you just saying buzzwords, dog. What? He's right. What's your rebuttal? He's right. He's right to what? I'm just saying buzzwords that all of these mega corporations are actually doing an H1-B visa structure, not in an effort to have an endlessly exploitable pool of talent, but instead that will inevitably and has displaced the American labor force. But instead, they're doing that because they are interested in improving the material conditions of the entire globe, specifically the global south. Is that what you're saying? Like you're actually bought in on the argument. What does this? Yeah. All of the mega corporations are just so woke, dude. They actually do have an underlying positive relationship. They are not working at the behest of capital and constant profit seeking. They actually have a secondary idealistic notion here. They want to improve. They want to improve the nation state of India. They want to improve China. That's the reason why they do H1-B visa structures. That is the real reason. The issue here is that he thinks it's the same as migrant worker who works in agriculture when it's significantly different to that. It doesn't matter because it is Okay. In practice, in application, it is the same. Okay. If the price point designed by, if the median wage designed for that specific sector, that specific field, that specific job is higher, then it is the same. It's just we're working with profit margins, in certain instances with significantly lower wages, or much higher wages than the average American in some instances. I feel like Bernie's just categorically right as a South Asian American. The current H1-B system fucks the American skilled workforce, but more importantly, causes brain drain in India and other recipient states of H1-B. It's so messed up. The Indian populace subsidizes the education of a skilled worker only for them to take their towns to the West for some extra bucks instead of helping the global South flourish. I mean, brain drain is one aspect of this, certainly. I think that, let's be real, H1B only exists as a white collar. What? H1B only exists because white collar companies can't easily get away with undocumented workers as the ag industry. Well, also, yeah, it's because white collar companies need specialized workers. H1Bs is currently implemented increased worker exploitation and depressed wages. That should be the end of the argument. It doesn't matter if it's U.S. citizens or immigrants being exploited. It's still exploitation. Okay. Engels and Lenin talked about how certain unions in England at the time were run like businesses, which meant that they would be more aligned with the bourgeoisie. You could argue that tech workers, many who make 4 to 5 times the average wages of the American worker. Yeah, you're right. Because as you know, the more money you make as a wage laborer, the less you are a wage laborer. That's also what Marx was saying. Dude, what are you talking about? What is this argument, dude? That's not how anything works. Okay, first of all, you're wrong. Tech workers do not make 5 times the average laborer in the United States of America. Okay, this is class politics. Income has nothing to do with that. It's ridiculous. Why do I talk so extensively about like players unions in the NBA, for example, or SAG-AFTRA and its protections that it offers to high-paid Hollywood celebrities? No matter how much money people are making, unions in any sector are tasked with making sure that they are getting back more of the value that they're creating for the capital owners. That's it. It's super simple. In any sector, in any field where there is a guy getting paid $1 million a year, if they are a wage laborer, there's someone else making $1 billion a year. Okay? That's it. That's it. It's adjusted to how much value that they are generating. I've seen an incredible engineer with an H1B get stuck in a position severely underpaid, had now years of experience than me. I was making 25K more. I was transparent about my pay and they were able to go back and get more money. They get absolutely abused by our system and it's by design. Salam, off topic, but a valid question. Do you not think your fundraising campaign that raised funds for Palestine way back gave Hamas the ability to carry out the 7th of October 2023 attack, even if not intentional? It's just something that weighs on my mind that I wanted to ask. Yes, the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. and the many other on-the-ground charities that we worked with that have to be sanctioned by the state of Israel to be operational to begin with inside of the Gaza Strip. Some of those children actually carried out the October 7 attack, even though we fundraised after the October 7 attack. That's the funniest, just curious take. Yeah. That's funny. No shot we arrived at Hassan at October 7. Yeah. Even though we fundraised after October 7, so that automatically disqualifies what you're saying. And even though if you knew anything about the philanthropic organizations, the aid organizations that work on the ground have to get previously sanctioned by Israel, like allowed to exist and operate in Gaza, because there's no way that you can get funds or resources into Gaza directly. In order for your question to be valid, I, one, would have to have a time machine where I could go back in time, and two, be able to somehow directly fund Hamas and evade Israeli authorities. Do you think I have a time travel machine? Anyway. Why is the chatter not responding? Following since 15 minutes ago. Anyway. He got his clip. I don't think that there is a good clip there for him in my response. What is this? Bernie's not responding to the full claim. Dude, you think I'm going to read this like Elon Dick Rider writing an effort post? His description on his Twitter says, make nuance cool again. Elon retweeted him. Of course he did, because Elon loves his dick riders. Bernie's not responding to the full claim. Elon and Vivek both acknowledge that the current H1-B system is broken and needs to be fixed so it isn't abused in the way Bernie describes. Yeah. Which, takes Elon at his word, which I find to be a foolish endeavor. They've also said it needs to be used to recruit top engineers. These two claims are compatible. This is the second time in 2 weeks he's done this. He did the same thing when Elon helped tank the 1,500-page spending bill. It's just another form of identity politics. Instead of focusing on channeling racial hostility, is channeling class hostility. Billionaires are evil. Is divisive. Don't fall for it. He actually did the whole, why are you coming after billionaires? channeling class hostility. How is that a bad thing? There's not a moment where there isn't class collaboration among capital owners. They are very well aware of their class position. They have designed society in a way that benefits the capital owning class. That is what capitalism is. What a ridiculous thing to say. Of course Elon Musk retweeted this. Oh my God. I like the way that this guy, liberals, right-wing liberals are so funny because their politics are so indecipherable when met with class politics, where they go, "Oh, you're doing identity politics, actually, sir. You're doing identity politics by engaging in class. Yeah, class politics is identity politics as well, actually. After all, billionaires are an identity." Yeah. Many chatters in here are simply identifying as poor, working class. If only they started identifying as billionaires, they would be able to, become billionaires. That's how it works. That's the power of, that's the secret right there. All you need to do is identify as a billionaire. That's how it works. He did the meme. Yeah, don't replace the culture war with class war, bro. Please don't worry about why you pay more in taxes to billionaires. Worry about the war on Christmas, the trans agenda. Please, bro. Stay distracted, bro. Broke mindset. Yeah. Person of C-suite. POC. Person of capital, please. The real POCs are not people of color. It's people of capital. Anyway. Here's where Bernard has been on this issue, okay? We covered the irony of a lot of people who were 100% on board with the reactionary anti-immigrant sentiment expressed by the Democratic Party at a time when undocumented migrants are under attack, okay? And how much these very same liberals were advocating for that, only to turn around and be like, and Bernie is wrong when he says that the H1-B visa structure is created in a way to displace American laborers with migrant laborers that can be exploited even further than the American laborers, which are already hyper exploited.
Not enough to be computer professionals, engineers, university professors. Just can't find anybody to be a university professor. Accountants, I guess Americans don't add very well. We can't do that work. Financial analysis. Nurses, I guess we just don't have the capability of producing nurses. Psychologists, Americans, I guess, can't do that. Lawyers. My God, if there's anything the United States is capable of producing are lawyers, but I guess we need more lawyers to come into this country as well, and elementary school teachers. Madam President, I guess the young people who graduate college in America are not quite qualified to be school teachers. Now, Madam President, if Americans won't take low-skilled jobs that pay poverty-level wages, and presumably if they're not smart enough to do high-skilled jobs, I think the question we have to ask is what kind of jobs are going to be available for the American people. We can't do low-skilled jobs. We can't do high-skilled jobs. Hey, what's there for us? And I happen to think that the Congress should be spending a lot more time discussing this issue and making it easier for us to create decent-paying jobs for American workers instead of allowing corporate interests to drive wages down by importing more and more people into this country to do the work that Americans should be doing.
Whoa, Las Vegas guy had his manifesto released. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's crazy. We'll take a look at that in a second. So Matt Brunig has a response. The various guest worker programs have drawn left-wing concerns for a long time. It was a major focus of Jobs with Justice when I worked there in 2011. EPI had a big H1-B report in 2020. You should broaden your informational universe, he says, which is the kindest way to dunk on Noah Smith. Basic argument is that guest worker programs create a second-class tier of worker, which is bad for both the guest worker, exploited, vulnerable to abuse, and native workers, undermined by second-class worker tier. It's basically the same argument as abuse of independent contractor status. Of course, the challenge is that these issues could be resolved by reducing guest work and increasing actual immigration, which draws other sorts of opposition, or reducing guest work without increasing actual immigration, which also draws other sorts of opposition. Another possible solution I've thought about would be universal unionization, sectoral bargaining, the usual stuff. I don't know. It seems like that could be a way to solve the problem. It just seems like it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you're from India, China, or from Oakland or Ohio, Springfield, Ohio. It doesn't matter. As long as you're a part of sectoral bargaining created by a union structure, you just get a basic level of wage and benefits, compensation and benefits that are given to you regardless. Feels like that's a more ethical process. Now, of course, that's crazy. Why is that crazy? Because that would undermine the profit seekers. That would ruin capital owners. You cannot do that. Incorporating guest workers into a collectively bargained agreements where they are necessarily equal and treated the same as other unit members would go a long way. It would be interesting to see what H1-B employers would say about mandatory collective bargaining for any employer using a guest worker program. I know Elon wouldn't be too happy. He's already of the mind that native Tesla workers shouldn't be allowed to unionize. Something that I've talked about quite a bit. Do you understand? Do you understand? Bernie's position should have been how the U.S. should protect H-1B workers, that they could be leveraged against other workers. His angle was stupid. No, he also brings that up as well in the argument. But if you are an American politician and you are watching certain sectors eviscerated, mass layoffs for tech workers that are highly skilled workers, American tech workers that are highly skilled, educated, and underemployed, then yeah, I think mentioning that first and foremost is apt, especially because he did also mention protections for the H-1B visa workers as well. But Bernie said dog trainers, and I didn't like that phrasing, so we unfortunately must continue the status quo. Yeah. Not gonna lie, I'm starting to become a hater as well. To be honest, you're a bit too often vindicated. It's just a bit suspicious at this point, not gonna lie. That's a weird reason to be angry at me, but okay. H1-B visa workers only want to come into America because we're destroyed their home domestic economies, and a lot of these job sectors are held them back, so they're decades behind. I mean, that's one part of it. There's a reason why you're not seeing a tremendous number of like Norwegian workers coming into the United States of America in the tech sector or something. You know what I mean? If your domestic conditions are apt, if your domestic conditions are fine, you are not going to seek out. By the way, yeah, I know that guy, that chatter was joking. That was an XUC point. Law, isn't it suspicious? He's always on the right side of issues. That is wrong. They do come, but they get their green cards faster. No, not by the same numbers, though. I mean, I would love a breakdown of where H-1B visa migrant workers are coming from overwhelmingly. I would suspect that it's overwhelmingly from countries that are poorer across the board. A bleeding